Welcome back, everybody. I got a fun one for you today, and before I do anything else, I just want to say thank you all so much for subscribing. You guys are making this fun little crazy experiment possible. Sentimental stuff aside, today we're celebrating Orktober, and I'd like to talk about a group of orkoids who don't get nearly the amount of appreciation that they deserve. That's right, I'm talking about squigs. While lore-wise, squigs are considered a form of green-skin life form, they never get to be talked about during Orktober. All we ever see is green. So I decided it's time for a little bit of red. Memes and Orktober aside, I decided I wanted to talk about how I actually paint, which is completely different than how I paint on video. When I paint on video, I'm more methodical. I go through things piece by piece, but when I actually paint in, real life, I don't do that. I tend to jump around the mini, but that's what this video is for. It's kind of meant to showcase how I paint in real life and how people probably paint in reality.
Today, like I mentioned, I got myself a little squiggly beast, and as always, I start off with a nice black primer. You could probably use whatever color you want, I just happen to have black primer, and well, I like it. To get him started off, I'm going to use some dark purple as a nice undercoat to make sure that my shadows are nice and vibrant and saturated. Our next step is a white zenithal highlight. Pay attention to how I focus the zenithal mostly towards the upper front part of the face, because that's where I want people to focus. The rest of the model isn't going to have a ton of detail, so I want people to focus on the face. I'm shooting for a tabletop plus quality, so a zenithal should set us up for some great depth when we go to our next step. Now we're going to put on the main color of the skin. For this, I'm using ball red, which is a nice, bright, saturated red. For this section, I'm going to use an airbrush, but you want to make sure that your coats of paint aren't too thick, otherwise you won't be able to see your zenithal underneath. And if we can't see your zenithal, then we'll lose out on all that contrast that we tried to build up underneath. Once we get our skin tone set, the next thing that we're going to need to do is reintroduce some shadows onto our skin. The way that we're going to do that is with a nice thin wash of a contrast paint. I'm using a nice rich purple contrast paint. I'm doing this to kind of maintain saturation, but you could theoretically use a dark red or whatever you want. Next up, I want to reintroduce some of that dark purple that I put as the base coat. I decided to use dark purple on the lips and the gums as base coats. For this step, I really recommend breaking out your nice Kalidsky sable brush because you're really going to want a fine tip for really fine detail work. If you get a little bit of purple on the red skin, it's going to be really difficult to go back and fix that. The next place that I decided to go was the teeth. For this, I decided to use Two Thin Coat's Griffin Claw. I actually just picked up the Two Thin Coat's range and I really enjoy it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. For this step, I'm using a base coat consistency. For this, I want paint consistency that's thick enough to cover in about 1 to 2 coats, but not too thick to the point where you can see brush marks. Also, while we have the Griffin Claw out, we want to make sure that we're hitting those toe beans and any mushroom stems that you can see. Next, I want to highlight the gums. For this, I'm just going to use purple from Pro Acryl. This step, I'm looking to layer, but I don't want super thin paint. I'm trying to get this guy done quick, so smooth blends aren't very important. Also, since he's so small, most people won't even notice. Let's stop and take a break to appreciate our fine work. While we do that, it's that time of the video to remind everyone to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and it's free. You can't beat that, right? Okay, enough pandering, back to work. The next stop is the beady little eyes. For this, I'm going to use warm yellow from Pro Acryl because it's an awesome color, and it will contrast nicely with the rest of the model. Next up, I broke out the Wah Flesh and the Moot Green to fill in the little blemishes on the squig. Use the Wah Flesh to base, and then the Moot Green as a tiny dot on top to create some volume. These little guys are probably my favorite part of the model, and I think they add a ton of character to the mini for not a lot of time. And we love low effort, high reward painting, don't we guys? Now that we're getting really close to finishing our little fellow, we have to do the most tedious part of the process, which is edge highlighting. For this, I'm going to use Squig Orange and eventually mix in some warm yellow for really sharp points. And this is where I make a really big mistake, but I'll actually get to that later. For now, I'm just doing my regular old edge highlighting, taking my time and using the side of my brush to create nice, even lines. Edge highlighting is tedious, but with small battle line guys like these, you really don't have to edge highlight everything. If I did that for 20 squigs, I'd probably go insane. So what I do is I only pick out the edges that really matter. Things like his face wrinkles, his mouth, cheeks. Getting these will give you the maximum bang for your buck when it comes to time and effort, which is always a huge dub in my book. And this is where my mistake comes in. I jumped up in value too quickly with my highlights, and I didn't like the way that they looked. To fix my mistake, I decided that glazing some voluptuous pink over the edge highlights that were too bright would be my best course of action. Doing this will let me incrementally tone down the brightness of the highlights while maintaining saturation. In regards to glazing, I actually love to use contrast paints to glaze. Contrast paints are highly pigmented, yet they're transparent, so it's really easy to get smooth gradients with them. In fact, I find that it's actually easier to glaze with contrast paints than with regular acrylics, and I'd really recommend them to anyone who's just starting to learn how to glaze. To finish up, I broke out the skeleton horde to finish off the teeth, and some colors that I had left on my wet palette to fill in the shrooms. To be honest, you could probably make the shrooms whatever color you like. I just happened to have green and purple on my palette, and I also had the colors that could be used to highlight them. So I went ahead and took the easy route. And there you have it. All in all, this rambunctious little man took me about 45 minutes to complete IRL. Truth be told, I probably could have gotten him done in 30 if I didn't make my aforementioned mistake, but yeah, I think he looks pretty good. After a quick base, he's ready to shred some stunties in the mortal realms. Thank you so much for stopping by, and remember to like and subscribe. And don't forget, the only badly painted mini is an unpainted one.